Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. Average Folks in the Afterlife number, I think it's 67. And we're continuing on, maybe this will be our last one, with Albert Taylor's Soul Traveler. That's probably not readable. And we left him thinking about ghosts, and I didn't think that chapter was particularly interesting or revealing one way or the other. But let's move on to some more deeper explorations from a chapter called Starlight, Star Bright. The astral body is a wondrous vehicle. It provides a sense of security and stability for the earthbound self by emulating the physical body. It allows us to appear well-dressed, beautiful, handsome, and as tall or short as our ego wants us to be. But the astral body is not always needed. Good point. I believe it is just one more costume we wear. Agreed. It appears to serve the same purpose as a child's security blanket. This first becomes apparent to me the night I found myself only a pinpoint of consciousness, as we heard earlier. And this sensation would be repeated on Halloween night of all times the following year. Yet something even more wondrous would take place. I would find my higher self. I know that's something a lot of you are trying to do these days, and keep at it. October 31, 94. I meditated for 20 minutes before I fell asleep with my hand on my wife's leg. Shortly thereafter, I was yanked back to full awareness, very much conscious of feeling paralyzed. I sat up astrally and surveyed the bedroom. No third party. I moved to my left toward my wife in a backward sliding motion. I was dragging something behind me that felt like a deflated inner tube. At that moment, I realized that parts of me were in 3 separate locations. My physical body was flat on its back on the right side of our bed. My astral body was the deflated inner tube dragging behind me, and I was a pinpoint of consciousness. I surveyed all this in bewilderment. As I continued to move around my wife's head, I discovered to my amazement that I was not my normal size. I was tiny and my wife appeared to be a giant. I had slid to her left side, staring at her with childlike curiosity, when she suddenly moved. As if I were at the end of a leash, I was instantly jerked back into my bodies. I reconnected and realized that my physical hand was still resting on her leg. Every time she moved, so would my hand. This had forced me to return. I lay back, trying not to move, and mentally reached out for the paralysis. I detached from the physical and sat up astrally. I found Otto standing on my right toward the foot of the bed. I smiled and greeted him openly without fear. Otto floated over to the side of the bed and stopped near my pillow. I stared at him with wonderment. I couldn't help but notice the luminescent brilliance of my spiritual friend. The warm, angelic glow that emanated from him was awe-inspiring. Then, without warning, I received mental information that obliterated the last remnants of my religious upbringing. This too will happen to you. I want to share what I now believe to be an inescapable self-realization. My guide, my guardian angel, my automatic pilot, I believe is my higher self. It stretches far beyond my imagination to fabricate a concept like this one, but I believe the being is me in a higher form of consciousness. An inner part of me somehow understood that this oversoul, as Jane Roberts referred to it, has been with me from my physical beginning. In essence, he has always been with me and always will. Abruptly, inadvertently, I reconnected. My wife had moved again. I moved physically away from her and attempted to return to the state of paralysis to no avail. Moving physically had somehow disrupted the continuity of the OBE experience. I lay there completely connected. In retrospect, I thought, I now know that I'm not alone, that I will not be alone, nor I have ever been alone. I believe that I am guided by my higher self, which in turn is guided by all that is, or God. This view was seconded at a recent IANS meeting when a newcomer sharing her experience for the first time spoke of an expression that her angel guide said to her that left her puzzled. Toward the end of her near-death experience, just before she returned to her body, her spiritual guide shared this insight. The smaller light follows the larger, and the larger light follows the source. To me, the meaning of this statement was very apparent. Others, including Robert Monroe, have suggested that entities that they thought were guides of various kinds turned out to be aspects of their higher self. And then others have not had this experience. I think it can, basically, it's a both and kind of situation. Some of your guides will be independent entities. Often people who knew you in past lives, were close to you one way or another, and are not in incarnation as you are, and agreed before birth, perhaps at your request, perhaps not, to be your guide, or a guide for you. And others seem to be, upon closer inspection, emanations from higher self, shall we say astral emanations, beings that never seem to come down to the physical but stay on the astral level to be guides. I've experienced both situations, and there's no easy dividing line. Just explore it for yourself and talk to your guides and see what they have to say on the matter. November 7. I fell asleep early about 9 and woke at 1. I tossed and turned until 3:30. And then lay there mentally reaching out for the paralysis until it slowly crept over me like a river of warm honey. I focused on picking up a destination and casually thought of walking in her den. Just like that, I ceased to be in my body in her bedroom and materialized in the den. This blinking out at one location and blinking in at another threw me off guard. I paused and asked myself, am I dreaming? My gaze panned the room as I started to walk about the house. Yeah, it's disorienting at first, but you'll get used to it. I floated up about 5 inches and skipped through one of the bedrooms to my 4-year-old son's bedroom door. I paused, walked through the door, and slid over to my son, Devon, and his bed. I noticed that he'd kicked off the blankets I'd so carefully tucked in. I began to hover over his bed, feeling protective of this frail little being. I left my son's bedroom through the wall, performed a quick patrol of the rest of the house, and then casually thought of my body. As if I were on an invisible conveyor belt, I headed toward my bedroom. Reconnection was so slightly noticeable, I wasn't sure if it had happened or not. The little finger trick placed me back in control of my body. These seemingly endless variables are amazing. I seem to be able to fly to a location or blink out and blink in to wherever my thoughts are focused. What are we that we can do these wondrous things? Well, we are wonderful beings. We are beings of light who have forgotten that we are beings of light and think that we're limited, fearful, doubtful, etc., etc. During this out-of-body experience, I also found my emotions to be greatly intensified, almost as if I'd become the emotion itself. For example, the feeling of love for my son was greatly intensified as I hovered over his bed. Many sages have spoken of love as a source of great light, and this night I felt I had discovered what they meant. November 11. I became aware of the paralysis, but was not fully focused on the feeling of falling backwards or shortness of breath that sometimes accompany it. Before I could file my mental flight plan, I blinked out of my physical body with no destination in mind. I knew immediately that I was not at the controls, that something was amiss. I blinked into the middle of nowhere. All around me there was an endless darkness, except directly in front of me, and where there was a single source of bright light. It was as if a blue-white star was burning a hole in the middle of a black velvet curtain. The light radiated outward in long, bright rays, like a crystal comprised of 1,000 needle-like spears. The shards penetrated my very soul. I can best describe this experience from the perspective of the re-entry heat shield on the Apollo 11 space capsule. As the space capsule's heat shield resisted the extreme temperatures of an Earth re-entry, microscopic pieces were vaporized and burned away. The light pierced through me. Like the capsule's heat shield, parts of me were burned away, parts I no longer needed. The light was excruciatingly wonderful. Oh, don't you like that? Excruciatingly wonderful. All at once I was wrenched from the light and tossed back into my body. "Are you okay?" my wife asked. "Oh, I'm all right," I said, wondering why I'd come back so abruptly. "Well, you were moaning, so I shook you." At this point, I tried not to focus on my swift return because I wanted desperately to go back. I didn't have long to wait. I was overcome by paralysis and blinked out. I blinked into the same locale as before, to the same radiant brilliance. And just as before, I felt the unwanted pieces of myself being burned away. Subconsciously, this entire sequence of events was completely familiar and welcome. Oh, what a heavenly light. Then, without warning, I was slammed back into my body. Hard. "Are you all right?" my wife asked. "Yes, I'm fine," I responded, feeling a little irritated. After this, try as I might, I was not able to return to the light. It seems that a feeling of anger is extremely pernicious to the chain of events leading to an out-of-body. Negative emotions are likely to stifle any attempts made to achieve a higher state of consciousness. In my physical life, I've begun to find out that anger is truly a useless tool. We use it knowingly and unknowingly to change persons or situations around us for the better. At least that's the intention. In truth, it is an instrument of control, dominance, and destruction. I think in certain situations, anger can be useful. Under control and to disturb a situation that needs to be disturbed. While I understand that he thinks anger can be useless, it is when it's uncontrolled and seeps all over you as a reactive situation. But there are situations as a spiritual explorer, especially on the lower astrals, where you might be doing some work down there, where anger is quite useful. And you'll find out for yourself. Just learn to control it. November 17th. I could barely stay awake. I read for a while, then fell asleep for the night, or so I thought. My wife woke at 1:30, got up to check on Devon, and then got back into bed with a thump. I was now awake. I lay there feeling completely abandoned by the Sandman. Tossed and turned to about 3:20, on a weeknight too. The thought of driving to work semi-comatose did not appeal. "Well, Al, since you've practically performed the interrupted sleep technique, you may as well top it off with a pre-flight," I thought. "Okay, I will." I was ready to try anything at that point. I completed the pre-flight, disengaged my astral parking brake, and waited. After about 10 minutes, I could feel paralysis creeping up on me. My ears were assaulted by a loud crackling. Focused my thoughts, heard a pop, and was literally tossed out of the body. As if I was being summoned, I headed straight for the wall that separates the living room from the bedroom. Without hesitation, I dove through the wall and quickly came to a halt. I had emerged partially into an empty black void. The upper half of my astral self was in the void, and my lower half was still in the bedroom. Ooh, now that can be freaky. There was no sound surface or light source out there, just a nothingness that seemed to stretch in all directions. Although I could not see it, I sensed a barrier of some kind ahead of me. I ventured forward, only gradually increasing speed. After what seemed like an eternity, I came to a stop. "Turn around before you get lost," a fearful voice inside commanded. I looked for a landmark, but the darkness was endless. I thought, what if there's nothing on the other side? After checking to see if I'd changed my orientation, I mentally put myself into reverse and backed out the way I'd come in, feet first. I felt a surface behind me and backed right through it into my bedroom. Maybe you should try this direction some other time. Turned toward the bedroom door and floated into the hallway. Floated down to the carpet and walked into the living room to examine the wall I should have emerged from earlier. There was nothing peculiar about the wall on this side. I decided to perform a quick reconnaissance of the house. Zipped through the kitchen and into the den. Observing nothing out of the ordinary, I turned and retraced my path. I turned the corner and headed toward the living room and almost ran right into Otto. He seemed to have been waiting for me. Another entity stood a few feet away but did not approach. No words were exchanged, just images and feelings. And all of this seemed very familiar to me. It was as if I had been interacting with the two of them in this manner for a very long time. I sensed that the entity a few feet away was not there because of me, but because of my wife. Could this be her guide or angel? What also occurred to me was that I felt no fear. I felt myself being recalled to my body. Without resisting, I quickly returned. The famous line of Roosevelt's, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself," applies to soul travel as well. I wonder how many times a spirit has communicated with my soul unbeknownst to my earthbound self. Is this how these things guide us through the course of our lives? And is this guidance normally on a subconscious level? I cannot help but think about the many times I've suddenly remembered a dream that was somehow suppressed or forgotten. Could this be one of the hurdles we must leap if we are to progress spiritually? Planes of Consciousness, another chapter. In this chapter, I'd like to share with the reader and future soul traveler some information about what it's like to explore multiple levels of consciousness, primarily the astral. As you may know, access to this information has been shrouded with secrecy since the beginning of time. The levels of consciousness, as explained by Eckankar, are physical, astral, causal, mental, and etheric. I would kind of put it in a different order myself. I guess I'm more of a theosophist. I'd put physical, astral, physical, etheric, astral, causal, mental. Got etheric in the wrong place. Information about these levels has been distorted by countless dogmatic teachings. You'll also find that with the chakras. Everyone's got a different opinion on the chakras and what they look like and their color, and So when you're reading up on these things, understand that nothing is the gospel truth, just people's opinions. Now, sincere opinions, and maybe backed up by personal exploration, but they're still partial truths. No one's got the whole story, including me. These levels of consciousness appear to be separated by thin areas of endless darkness or a black void. Each level possesses its own signature vibration. The physical level vibrates at its lowest rate. In order to transition to higher levels, one must somehow change or increase the vibrations of the soul body. But this is true only above the astral plane. On the astral plane, the soul occupies the astral body. The only way I've been able to ascend above the astral plane is to leave the astral body behind. And when the astral vehicle has been shed, a lighter, brighter, permanent non-physical body can be realized. This remarkable light vehicle has often been referred to as the etheric body. The vast majority of people are afraid to learn more about other levels of consciousness because of fearful condemnations like, "It's the work of the devil." In other cases, individuals have been denied access to the ancient wisdom because they were deemed spiritually unqualified. Well, yes, in the past, it was wise to test the moral character of aspirants, and that was certainly done in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and in the various secret societies that sort of bubbled underneath the surface through the long reign of the Vatican with all its suppressive techniques. But there was always people who didn't do that. Black magicians, for example, who thought a balanced moral character was a hindrance. We'll get to that another time. In the past, knowledge of this sort could only be acquired by dedicating months or years of study in remotely isolated ashrams and or monasteries, or, country houses. Secret societies were often supported by aristocrats that were interested in things could happen in their vast sort of country homes where no one would know. For these future soul travelers, it is important to acquire as much knowledge as possible, preferably before one sets sail into the world of what I'd like to call the dear but not departed. It is my aim to share some of this knowledge with the reader. I'd like to provide some reassurance for those who are fearful and a partial roadmap for the more adventurous. You need not be fearful when delving into the many levels of consciousness because they're a natural part of our existence. It has not been easy for me to overcome my own unfounded fears. Yes, we know that. Deep within myself, I have found my fear to have come from or be driven by a basic flight or flee survival instinct. Now that's the first chakra. Flight or flee. Fight or flee. Sorry, did I say flight? As you probably know, without this survival instinct, we would likely have gone the way of the dinosaur and become extinct. True. If early humans had not run screaming into their subterranean shelters or massed together to repel a ravenous predator, we would not have survived. Now, it's certainly one of my positions that those predators that chased us into those little caves were a necessary part of our evolution because we had to develop a first chakra. And when we arrived like babes in swaddling clothes on this planet, we didn't have one. And we had to develop one. And predators after you to have you for dinner was a very good way of doing it. And it went on for many hundreds of years, if not thousands. Anyway, another story. The basic survival instinct, however, is a hindrance in exploring the astral and beyond. You have to work to get past it. The next thing to understand about the astral is it's not devoid of life. The beings there are quite unlike anything you are familiar with, but don't kid yourself, they're very real. They can be different and unusual. The level of enlightenment achieved by these beings may vary a great deal. In addition, just because the life forms there qualify as spirits and will likely possess far greater capabilities than most of us, it does not mean that we are all wise and forthright, or they are all wise and forthright. When a person is passed on to a higher level, the person doesn't automatically become an angel or guide or spirit master. I have found that we retain many characteristics of who we are in this life, both the positive and the negative. This is true. The only thing you don't have in spirit when you first get there is a physical body. You get all the other stuff. It's all there. All your hang-ups, all your aspirations, all your good character qualities, all your angelic qualities, and all that self-obsessed, nasty little criminal hiding in the basement. Well, he's there too. This does not mean these entities should be feared. It just means that not all encounters with them will be necessarily for your higher good. Well, I don't know about that. All these encounters do help turn you into a great explorer and spiritual warrior. They do indeed, if they don't scare you half to death. The astral plane, as you may know by now, is just one place we go when our bodies die. However you end up there, be it death or soul travel, you may experience a variety of unexplained sounds. For example, the sound associated with the astral plane is the roaring of the sea, according to Eckankar. You see, there's a lot of Eckankar in this book. It's his main influence, other than Jane Roberts, I'd say. The causal plane is the tinkling of bells, the mental plane is running water, and the etheric is of buzzing bees. Again, this is Eckankar's viewpoint. If you don't find that, don't worry about it. It's just another angle on the multidimensional mystery. The key point is the astral plane may seem like a place to go, but in actuality is something you become aware of. The astral plane, like oxygen, permeates the physical plane. On the astral plane, we unconsciously create a body double comprised of astral material. This astral body, like the physical body, serves as a containment vehicle for the soul. Yes. As I mentioned earlier, it provides transitional stability for the newly dead as well as the soul traveler. Nevertheless, it is not permanent, nor is it absolutely needed. I have slipped out of it, leaving it behind like a worn-out pair of coveralls. If you manage to accomplish this, you will still retain all the simulated senses you have in the physical. Sight, sound, touch, and in rare situations, taste. When you start out, keep your jaunts localized, gradually venturing further as you gain more confidence. Remember, physical locations of this planet beyond are merely a thought away. You can get there over your head. Sorry, you can get in over your head in the blink of an eye, so keep it short and simple. He goes talking about how astral experience helped with some various physical ailments. And I think we can skip that because they're personal. For the would-be soul traveler, there may exist within you certain religious beliefs that will prevent you from transcending the astral. When you get past these constraints, you will be able to experience the multiple dimensions of the astral plane. No matter how painful it is, I have had to discard, and I continue to discard, antiquated beliefs that I held dear. You may find this painfully necessary when searching for your own ultimate truth. I won't pretend that I have seen every type of non-physical entity that may exist, but none that I saw had wings. I fly without wings. I would think the angels do too. Now, of course, you will find certain psychics insisting that angels have wings, Lorna Byrne being one, and she has quite a large following, and I expect, she's sincere. I'm sure she does see wings on them, but understand that lots of people don't see wings on angelic beings. So it's all about perception. Then we get to a chapter called The Ultimate Truth. Like many explorers, Albert comes to some notions about, life, the universe, and everything. And I think we should have a little look at what he thinks the ultimate truth is, his perception of it. Before we delve into the mystery of the ultimate truth, perhaps we should first ask the ultimate question. For me, that is, why are we here? I will not pretend that I have found the answer, but I will offer viewpoints influenced by my soul travels. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. First of all, we exist independently of our physical bodies, hence the ability to travel out of body. For me, this has been proof enough that I will survive death's embrace. Exactly, I've been saying that for years. All you have to do is go out of body once and have even just a semblance of lucidity about it, and you're out there floating around, and there's the body on the bed. Pretty obvious, I'd say. Second, we must accept that a multitude of beings exist in a dimension other than the physical. Third, it has been well documented that during hypnosis and after a near-death experience, hundreds of people have reported experiencing a detailed review of their lives. How many times have we heard the expression, "My life flashed before my eyes"? This phrase has always been associated with life-threatening circumstances. At this point, I must query, why would a review of past indiscretions be of value after departing from the world of the living? If we die and go to heaven, hell, or somewhere in between, of what benefit, possibly, is a review of what's now unchangeable? Could it be we are given this life review in order to learn by mistakes in the hope of not repeating them? I suggest that this may be one of our first clues that we somehow return to Earth and the Earth life system. If so, then what is to be gained by returning to experience another life? Could it be to facilitate spiritual evolution of the soul? I have personally come to believe that life without reincarnation is like a stage play with only one act. There just isn't enough time for character development. Oh, so true. So providing we do somehow return to the physical and live again, where will all these life lessons eventually lead us? Is there some distant yet unattainable goal? Based on my spiritual travels, I would say yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt. On the physical plane, you are born, grow older, and finally experience death. It is then that some of those experiencing the near-death report being drawn into a tunnel filled with multicolored lights. Oh, swirling multicolored lights. Some report no lights at all, just an eerie blackness, which sounds similar to the black void I experienced. When they arrive at the end of the tunnel, many recall being met by a deceased relative or one or more light beings. This generally occurs on the astral plane. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this location or state of consciousness is referred to as the bardo. I know the word bardo is becoming sort of trendy these days. That's the influence of Buddhism for you. It's just another plane of being. and I would resist the temptation to go to the exotic word over one that we've been using for hundreds of years. Tibetan Buddhism is, after all, a religion, just like Catholicism or Presbyterianism or Vedanta or whatever. They're all religions. They're all encrusted with ancient beliefs and principles that modern practitioners often don't fully understand, but think they do. There's a lot of repetition of what's in the ancient sacred books. And Tibetan Buddhists are just as likely to do this as Catholics or Protestants or anybody, really. But it sounds a little more exotic. But beware. I've mentioned earlier that in 1993, I experienced an overwhelming feeling of finally coming home. Only after myriad repeat visits have I come to accept this state of consciousness as the bardo. Since then, I continue to have a deep feeling for what I now know to be home. This longing has become a permanent part of my waking consciousness. I am constantly homesick. So be advised, you may too develop this agonizing longing for home. Yeah, that can be a pain in the butt. And makes you dissatisfied with your daily life, even more than you often are to begin with. So watch out for that. Sometime after exiting the tunnel, a life review must be endured. I say endured because looking back at one's own life has been described as a mixture of pleasure and devastating sadness. The extent of sadness usually depends on how cruel or kind a person has been to others. Those experiencing the near death have described the feeling the exact same pain, sadness, and hurt they thoughtlessly and selflessly caused another. After the life review, a soul now has the opportunity to plan the next step in its evolutionary path. On the next page is a chart. Charts, well, I'm not going to do it. It's sort of a chart that shows the physical, astral, causal, mental planes, years between incarnations, and how various souls experience it. I think we can get something out of this without going to the chart. On the chart, the D arc represents a type of soul often referred to as the earthbound. This type of soul has been affectionately nicknamed a repeater. This is because the type D must reincarnate numerous times to gain a minimal amount of enlightenment. These souls ignore essential insights given during the life review and often fail to satisfy inescapable karmic requirements. The type D soul is likely to reincarnate quickly, missing the benefits of a more careful planning. The type D soul has often been blamed for vast amounts of the world's heartaches and sorrows. This type of soul is usually narcissistic and self-destructive. Arcs C and B depict a soul at a higher state of evolution. This type of soul is deeply affected by the life review and is usually remorseful when confronted with past transgressions. These souls would generally direct more energy towards preparation and planning for the next life. At the C and B stages of evolution, the time spent in the bardo increases, allowing for higher arcs into the upper levels of consciousness. These souls are just becoming aware of who and what they truly are. The type A soul is a highly developed being that has attained a very high level of self-awareness during its incarnation. While living on the physical plane, these souls are usually spiritual teachers, masters, or shamans. The type A soul often has a profound impact on the human population as a whole. These enlightened souls may well be messengers from God. Some of them have been variously labeled saints, masters, guides, or prophets. The primary focus of this type of entity is to lead lost souls back to all that is, or God. Lastly, but not least, the oversoul entity, a being of unimaginable capabilities and possibilities. This type of self-aware consciousness is virtually unlimited. This being is no longer tied to the seemingly endless cycle of reincarnation. The oversoul entity has been referred to as a god in the making. An oversoul is a being that has progressed light years from the type A soul. The oversoul is rapidly progressing towards the ultimate truth, which is to become a co-worker and co-creator of God. I believe this is the irrevocable destiny of the soul. This brings to mind the expression, "We are all created in God's image." After slipping free of my astral body and existing as a pinpoint of consciousness, being created in God's own image continues to possess possibilities far beyond these earthly vehicles of flesh and bone. After this, he goes into techniques that you've probably seen elsewhere, and I think that's probably enough to be going on with. A very good example of someone's starting out and making some, progress over a year or two, and quite typical of others in that position. And interesting, I haven't discovered any other books by this author, which is interesting because most people, once they do one book on out-of-body experience, will tend to do 3 or 4. And extend their explorations into greater and greater levels of the mystery. So with that, we'll bid farewell to Albert Taylor's Soul Traveller, and we'll be moving on to others fairly soon. I might be moving into some either soul rescue stuff or some more detailed NDE experiences from a book that's not at all well known. We'll see how that goes, and until then, I'll bid you farewell, and much enjoyment on your own explorations, and don't worry, be happy. It's all that turbulence. It's all just Maya. Maya, that's what the Hindus call it, illusion. You'll get past it all. It comes and goes like thunderstorms, basically. Au revoir, mes enfants.